Everyone. We're just waiting a few moments to allow more time for people to join, but we'll be getting started shortly. Alrighty, it looks like we're good to get started. Hi again, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on ACP versus UCP, framing the investment decision. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Brittany, and I lead content at Fabric, and I'll be kicking things off. Laurence, next slide. Mark Lewis and Laurence Nixon have a great discussion prepared for you all. But before we dive into the webinar, just a couple of things to know. We will be recording this webinar and sending it to you all after, so you can rewatch it and share it with your teams. So be on the lookout for that. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have some time for Q&A. So be sure to get your questions ready. And with that, I'll pass it to Laurence.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany. I just wanted to start with a quick thank you for everyone joining today. I know that there's tons of different priorities and things going on, but we appreciate you being here with us. And we've organized a pretty good conversation around these two agentic commerce protocols and what that means to you. So I'm excited to dive in. So on January 11th of this year, Google CEO Sundar Pichai took the stage at NRF and announced the Universal Commerce Protocol. And this event represents a major shift in e-commerce for a couple of reasons. First, it gives agentic commerce credibility. I think it signals that agentic commerce is here, and Google, as the biggest tech company on the planet, they really sort of planted a flag and said, "This is happening, and let us show you how." Secondly, UCP defines a comprehensive agentic commerce model. And that's really important because I think this was sort of happening in silos, and Google, the biggest company in the world, biggest tech company, has collaborated with the biggest retailers, vendors in the commerce space to develop this framework through which we can use to publish products and have them discovered and purchased. So UCP, along with ACP, allows us to move beyond just simply discovery and turn our focus towards the offer. So where are we? I think we're in an arms race. There's announcements, seemingly every week or two that are major in nature and shifting the goalposts. And I think there's going to be huge implications for brands, retailers, as they're already competing for attention in 2026. So, what do we know? I think that as stated, attention is moving to AI. I think beyond the sort of traditional organic search, the keyword searches, and beyond direct traffic, AI really is becoming sort of ubiquitous in our lives, right? Whether that be at home, whether that be at work. And we're seeing this in some of the data. I think Black Friday was a seminal moment. AI-driven clicks to U.S. retailers jumping 800% year over year and influencing about 3 billion in online sales is fairly significant. what does this mean today? There's a famous quote: "If you ain't first, you're last." I think AI search will return one answer, and your product better be it. Right? We're not necessarily competing anymore for those top 11 blue links. It's really about, are you providing the right context and are you being picked up in these LLMs, and are your products being surfaced? So as we look at the chart on the right, we've been kind of going through these stages, and I think what's really important to note is, an 805% increase at Black Friday last year. What is that in terms of its total overall kind of referral traffic? Brands, merchants are looking at their own site, and they're maybe saying, okay, this is incrementally, relatively small, but it's the exponential growth that we're seeing that's really tremendous. These two big moments, I think, happening as we went from research to discover in 2025, is that OpenAI, Google, right? They're starting to build out the catalog through which people can discover products on their site. Walmart, their first party, third party products launch in the fall of 25, and just a couple weeks ago, Etsy and Wayfair launch checkout through UCP. So this is all happening within the span of 4 or 5 months, and it's only going to accelerate. And so what comes next? This is my prediction in the pink box there, what I'm calling Black Friday Agent Monday, and the rise of autonomous carts. I think it's natural to assume that as we get into kind of multi-vendor cart building that's already being tested on ChatGPT Instant Checkout, by holiday season 2026, we're going to be seeing AI generate these really robust carts that pertain to these intent-rich prompts. So whether it's shopping for deals, shopping for a family member who's loves football or loves soccer, or whatever the situation may be, that there's going to be this kind of push towards autonomy. I think that's where we're going and where we're going to see this accelerate towards. So the big thing, though, in the meantime, we're still trying to wrap our heads around what agentic commerce checkout is. And that's really the focus of our discussion today, is to try to level set, where are we now, and what are the implications. So I'm Laurence Nixon, Director of Product Marketing at Fabric, where we're building the agentic commerce platform to drive product visibility and optimize agentic commerce conversion. With me today is Mark Lewis, the founder and CEO at Netalico. They're a full-service e-commerce agency, and they're the strategic partner creating growth brands on Shopify. They've been doing this for over a decade. And just a few weeks ago, Netalico was promoted to Shopify Premier Partner as they shift to support their clients' agentic commerce journeys. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me, Laurence.
No, it's great. You got a great headshot. I'm just looking at these two pics. We've got the Hair Olympics going on right now, so we'll let the.
Would you be surprised that I said it is maybe a little AI? Everything's AI.
Just not the hair. Just not the hair.
Yeah.
All right, There we go. Get rid of the screen there, so we can just have kind of more of a discussion. So, Mark, I think one of the things I want to do and start with is just kind of take the pulse of the market, right? What's happening on the street? You and your work, you represent a lot of brands. You're helping advise customers right now, go on this journey with them. So, since this pivotal moment at NRF, what are you hearing from your customers? Like, what are they feeling? Is it anxiety? Are they excited? Is it skepticism? What are you hearing from some of your customers, the brands and retailers you work with?
It's definitely been a bit of a roller coaster. And I would start in early 2025 when a couple of brands started reporting their organic Google traffic kind of dropping off. And at first, that was very alarming. But then I think most of them realized that it was being replaced by like Google AI search, Google AI overview, and of course, ChatGPT and Claude. So I think that was kind of the first signal like that a shift is coming. And then in September, Shopify and OpenAI announced the instant checkout coming to ChatGPT. And then I think at that point, people really kind of woke up and said, okay, so a shift is coming. How do I get ready for it? and there was like a sign up for like a beta of the OpenAI integration, and there's still like a waiting list for that. In the meantime, at NRF, then Google announces UCP, which is kind of the competitor to OpenAI's ACP, and then everyone's like, okay, what do I do now? Like, do I need to pick one, pick the other? It suddenly became a little muddier of like, what's the like path to kind of, being agentic ready. So I think that's the state we're in of, okay, like there's not necessarily one clear path anymore. What do I do?
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, it seems like there's pressure, right, from boards, from executive teams, um, deploy AI, utilize
Yeah.
AI. How are we using it to accelerate, to find efficiency? Why are our products discoverable like that on these channels? We heard that at NRF, right? A lot of folks coming through the booth, saying, listen, I'm kind of head up this division, or I'm this operator, and I've been tasked develop a strategy. So, I think that there's a little bit of anxiety, right now, at least that we picked up on. But there's endless vendors and technology companies trying to sort of solve these problems for people. So, and we'll certainly talk a little bit about what Fabric's doing in a minute. So, okay, so I guess it's fair to say maybe a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of skepticism, unknown, questioning. Why don't we start? Because I really want to make sure that in this discussion, we're bringing this back to the central question of like, how do you frame a decision on where you put your time, resources, energy? Let's just start with a little bit of education. Maybe can you just walk us through ACP, UCP, and the differences between the two protocols?
Yeah, so at a basic level, ACP is ChatGPT's version of an agentic connection, and UCP is Google's version. Shopify is a partner in both of them, so it's not necessarily that Shopify merchants will have to choose sides, but there is a fair amount of differences between each protocol. ACP is a bit more of a basic almost like a buy now checkout within ChatGPT. It technically is open source, so other agents, LLMs could adopt it, but OpenAI is really the one pioneering it. Versus UCP is a little broader in its scope in terms of like product discoveries, so like the feeds, even order fulfillment, returns, loyalty. Google is really thinking of this as kind of the end all agentic connection for commerce, and I think they have a fair amount of weight in the market. And I was actually at Google last week. I've talked to Google team members, and UCP is going to be integrated into everything commerce at Google, Google Merchant Center, Google Ads, Google Shopping, everything. So it's the full stack, at least for Google, and it's open source, so other agents can adopt it as well.
And so I've kind of referenced this question. I mean, there's the old like, Lightning port versus USB-C, right? It's sort of like these. You kind of have these two different modals or tools, whatever. So is that a situation here? You've got to pick one, or is this the kind of thing you can explore? And is there a strategy where you try to kind of go for more breadth and have coverage for your catalog for your products across both?
I would say in general, you don't have to pick one, but in terms of kind of where you invest your resources, particularly if you're on a custom e-commerce platform or something, more custom like Magento or um, shopware. So in those cases, you're going to have to do a lot more work to integrate with each protocol. With Shopify, since as a platform they have such a huge aggregate size, they're using that kind of weight to work with the OpenAI and Google to basically bring the experience that like a multi-billion-dollar company would have to a merchant doing, a couple million or, even a couple sales a day. So, that I guess that not to like pitch Shopify too much, but that is the advantage of Shopify. You kind of get the weight of a huge platform without actually having to be a huge merchant.
Yeah, and I think it's we were kind of chatting before this about, what's Shopify's point of view, or what's their strategy in all this, right? And I think that where we landed in talking about it is sort of that if they can be at the forefront and essentially, assure distribution, right, on these channels for their merchants, for their customers, it's a win-win. Maybe talk a little bit. There's been some discussion about, it's sort of now an opt-out situation if you're a Shopify merchant. Is that sort of accurate? And what should, if you're a merchant on Shopify, big, small, what should you be kind of doing right now to understand, what this change means within the Shopify ecosystem?
Yeah, so in terms of the opt-in, opt-out, there's two components of ACP. I'll start with ACP because it's a little further along in terms of like you mentioned Etsy's actually already enabled it. So if you go on ChatGPT now and search for Etsy products, you can see the experience. You can see the buy now button. Uh, and that is, essentially what we're talking about. Instead of the visit button, now there's a buy it now button and you have this experience within ChatGPT. For Shopify merchants right now, there's still kind of like a beta waiting list. So merchants are being accepted very slowly into the checkout portion. But there's a secondary portion, which is like a product feed that's feeding into OpenAI and ChatGPT that is opt out. So basically, you're going to be included in this product feed of all the products in Shopify pushing into ChatGPT, unless you select to opt out of that. The second part is the checkout integration, and that is opt-in. There will be a Shopify app available in the App Store for everyone at some point, and you have to just install that app, enable it, and then once you do that, then it will turn your visit button to the buy now button. Um, and with that, maybe I should bring up too, there will be a 4% fee on top of Shopify's fees to OpenAI with any transaction that uses like the buy now button.
Interesting. Yeah, the sort of the take rate. Um, Maybe before we jump into kind of your model for evaluating the decision, just talk about a little bit, because you'd kind of mentioned a way to frame this is in, kind of customer acquisition costs. So maybe talk a little bit just quickly about the this take rate and kind of how you frame this in your head and talk to customers about.
Yeah, with this 4% fee, I do think it is a little controversial because they just announced ads in ChatGPT also recently. So OpenAI is definitely trying to find revenue sources wherever they can. They probably need it, based on the things that we're hearing in the news about how much money they're burning. Um, but the 4%. In general, I would say it's a good affiliate fee. You're gonna pay like Amazon 10-ish%, 10 to 15% anyway. So it's not unreasonable, but I do think the decision is slightly more complicated than that because enabling the checkout won't affect your visibility. That is completely content dependent, or at least, OpenAI has said you're going to be featured or not featured, interdependent of whether you enable the checkout. So literally, as I said earlier, what's changing is that visit now button is going to turn into a buy now button. And I think it is an open question depending on the brand, your product mix, whether the kind of instant impulse purchase, um, you know, part of that checkout is good for you, kind of more like similar to TikTok Shop, or keeping the visit now button might be better for you because then they go to your website, you can kind of merchandise them more, tell them more about your product, and you can potentially upsell them and you increase the average order value. I think the biggest limitation right now that I've seen with the ChatGPT checkout is you can only have one item at a time in your cart in your checkout. And so if a brand is very reliant on upsells, warranties, cross sells of other products, and basically, their margin is very dependent on making sure we pack as much in each order as possible. Enabling the checkout could cost you 4%, and it could kind of tank your average order value. So again, it's maybe a slightly open question and experiment for each merchant to figure out what's best for them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting framing for kind of where to start some research, right, and evaluation. You have prepared this kind of what we're calling the Mark's agentic commerce decision matrix, right? I think this
Yeah.
what you're just speaking to kind of plays into this, right? And you have this quote that enabling both protocols is directionally correct, but it lacks nuance. So here's how to prioritize. So maybe walk us through kind of each quadrant here, left to right, kind of give us the high level overview on how you should frame this depending on the commerce stack you're running.
Yeah, so if you're on Shopify using Stripe or for Shopify it's Shop Pay, but it's essentially a pass through to Stripe. Um, it's pretty much a no-brainer to enable the ACP feed into ChatGPT and enable UCP when it's available to go into Google. It doesn't cost you anything. So why not? As I mentioned earlier, w enabling the actual checkout is a bit of an evaluation, even for a Shopify merchant. Um, UCP, they haven't said that there's going to be any fees associated with it. So again, like why not? Um,
Mhm.
and if you're on a custom platform and you're using Stripe, it's a very similar decision, but you know, I would look at where your traffic's coming from. And to be honest, in the future, Google probably will still be the leader. But again, if you look at the charts and like the referrals on individual sites, the traffic from ChatGPT and Claude and like Perplexity, it's rising very fast. And so that again, that's kind of merchant specific. But wherever you see the highest traffic, I would start there first. Um, if you're on Shopify and you don't use um, Stripe, I would start with UCP, and again, look at whether you want to, enable the ACP checkout for your contribution margin. If you're on custom and you don't use Stripe, maybe you should consider migrating to a more, mainstream platform like Shopify. I do think that is one of the advantages of being on a large platform like Shopify. You're kind of going with the stream and you're able to take advantage of the latest technologies as soon as possible versus if you're on custom or something like more open source, then it's going to be a lot more work for you and you're likely going to have to wait months to years to even have that option to like plug into those platforms.
Yeah, a little bit more friction in the way. Um, I
Yeah.
think one thing. This is a great way to frame it. Um, One thing we keep coming back to and we keep seeing is like, despite all of this, right, and this decision around checkout, visibility is still, in our opinion, like step number one, right? Are your products being seen, right? Are they being found? I think that comment, if you ain't first, you're last, that I referenced earlier, right? If you are not in that answer, returned in that answer, I mean, you're dead, right? There's no 11 links that you can kind of scroll through or users can scroll through. So maybe just your thoughts on, I guess, getting your product data ready, ensuring that you're driving visibility to your catalog before I make a plug about Fabric's visibility assessment.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, visibility is everything. And so these, checkouts and agentic commerce tools are cool. But if you're not mentioned when you search, what are the best ski gloves, what are the best, ski helmets, um, it doesn't really matter if you have the checkout enabled or not. And to go back to your point, the content is really what's driving the visibility. And so if you look at the ACP and UCP specs, they're very, title, description driven, very, very text driven as you would expect. And so if you don't have all that rich information in the content that's being fed into these platforms, then you're not going to show up. And as you said, it's it will if you ask for like the best ski gloves, maybe it'll give you three or four, but beyond that, you're invisible. So
Yeah,
that that is the most important thing that you can do at this point.
awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself. And we happen to have a tool. If you scan this QR code, it'll take you to the visibility assessment that we host on fabric.inc, and you can start by understanding your catalog visibility, and then set up a call to chat with someone at Fabric about this between us, and Netalico versus understanding your content depth and quality. Mark's doing a great job at Netalico advising customers on that decision with UCP, ACP, and how to shore up your actual infrastructure. So that's the plug. Let's jump into our Q&A. We have had like the Q&A going from the beginning. Brittany, sorry, I might need you to just prompt if there are any questions that have been submitted through the chat, and Mark and I would be happy to answer. Let me just see here. Do I don't see any questions. Maybe I've got one more for you, Mark. Something about this is sort of the timeline in which this is sort of taking place. There was a study that shows only about 2% of major retailers are actually active right now on ACP,
Mhm.
and obviously UCP is brand new, and so Etsy and Wayfair jumping on is a big start. Um, you've been having discussions with Shopify. You've been talking to OpenAI. Do you see this as something that's kind of being intentionally slow rolled, or is it a matter of just like capacity and trying to catch up with demand?
I think it's more of a capacity. Particularly OpenAI is doing all the things all at once. And even though they're, one of the biggest private startups in the world, they are still limited. And so I think they're trying to catch up, but I think the revenue, that 4% is very enticing for them, and they're kind of chasing revenue at this point. So I would expect them to really push this harder and harder. And the limitations I mentioned of like only one item, um, I right now that is a limitation, but I think as this rolls out and they, improve it over time, I think it will get much broader. It will support multiple items, multiple vendors, and you can kind of, make your cart in ChatGPT. So I think that's more of the future. But what we have right now is it's a little more of a TikTok kind of like buy now impulse purchase.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they roll out. I mean, I know that I've seen some experimentation with multi-card on OpenAI, and you got to think that OpenAI is going to come back with some big swing right after UCP is announced, and there's been a lot of momentum and talk about it. So it's an exciting space. I mean, it's changing so much. I think that the fundamentals though are still there, right? It's about having your good good product data, right? Good foundations in content quality and depth, and then utilizing the right tools and setting it up as you've mentioned. Um, so I'm just looking to see if we've got any other questions. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, Lawrence and Mark, we have a question that came in. I'll ask it. Are there any latency trade-offs in the distributed deployments between ACP and UCP in your experience?
I'm not sure what you mean by. latency trade-offs, but I'll guess in terms of one, I think ACP is uh, further along in the process of rolling it out. It is live, for certain small subset of merchants in ChatGPT. UCP, I do think that they kind of announced it slightly premature, but I think that they needed to announce it so that everyone could start preparing for it, and also so it didn't leak too early. And so that was more of like their stake in the ground to say, okay, this is kind of the standard. This is what we're going to be building on from now on. Um, so, I think ACP, if you're really pushing that and following that, you're going to have a little bit of a kind of first mover advantage, as it is not as well known, and people are really trying to, you know, get get to be the first one in ChatGPT and rank in ChatGPT. But I do think that UCP is going to be a little more broadly adopted, and that's probably going to be a bit more of like kind of the future of agentic commerce. Um, but as we talked about before, you don't really have to choose one or the other, um, especially if you're on Shopify. So I would just, push as hard as possible, and, to Lawrence's point, focus on your content right now, because that's the best thing that you can do to try to get your visibility up, so that when the checkout is enabled on either platform for you, then you're right there, and it's a easy win for you.
Yeah, and I think that your point about the two sort of there's the product feed, right? And then I think that as things like more dynamic data points come into play around your inventory, location, promotions, right? And we've seen that UCP is offering more of a roadmap for this, right? They've got kind of a complete model, even into things like customer service and sort of post-purchase. There's a little bit more uh, architected, or at least drawn out, mapped out for people to follow. So, but at this stage, again, it's there's so few vendors, at least on ACP, and with UCP, I think it's going to be an arms race, first mover advantage. You said it. If you can get yourself ready and in a position to take advantage, because there's 2 billion people actively using Google a day, right? And even if they're just using simple keyword searches, those turns into AI overviews, which can feed products and so on. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how ChatGPT responds. But maybe I'll give one last shout out to the Q&A. Doesn't look like there are any more coming in. I want to respect everybody's time, um, and just give again a really big thank you, Mark. Thanks so much for your time today. This was really insightful conversation. Again, Mark Lewis, CEO of Netalico. I'm Laurence Nixon of Fabric. Please get your AI search visibility assessment at fabric.inc, and stay tuned and pay attention for the next one. We're going to keep this webinar series moving along here in 2026. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.